that they were asking all of his coworkers about him, and they all just like gushed about Worf, how much they liked him and how good of a worker he is and how, great of a friend he is and all that.
I think part of it is that they raised him and they want to know what son that they raised and what people think of their son. And it's real sweet. I think we've got these two great stories here with Picard and Worf, and it all goes back to that Wesley Crusher. Just strike it. You don't need any of that. You could actually just kind of pump up these two stories a little bit more. You don't need to have everything come in threes. Right.
I agree. So after this, the next scene, we're back at Chateau Picard. The Picard family is sitting down to dinner, and then, sort of regular dinner chit-chat, but then we learn that Robert doesn't like technology like their dad, and he's, nobody cooks anymore, but Marie actually wanted a replicator, because, it might be a little easier on her every now and then. And
for real,
it's like, come on, it's like years ago whenever microwaves came out and people are like, no, I don't need that,
Mm-hmm. Well,
electricity, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, even though this is a very quiet scene, and nothing's really happening here other than people eating soup, I actually really love this scene a whole lot, because it really speaks to a very classic science fiction trope of, how far do we progress before we forget our roots? How far do we go before it's too far and we've forgotten what made us human in the first place? And it's a very typical sci-fi storyline and a tool to kind of start a conversation. And I do love that, you have these two brothers who couldn't be more different. And this scene, I think, really shows it, because, his brother Robert is like, oh, you're drinking too much synthahol. It's ruined your palate. And Picard and Jean-Luc says no. He goes, it heightens one's appreciation for the genuine article. So they are looking at technology very differently, these two.
And I like how, if you took out the actual sci-fi elements of it, maybe they were arguing about, Picard comes in and he's got all this money and he wants to use his money, and they're arguing about that. It's they still have the same sort of family dynamic and emotional sort of in this, it's like an emotional scene that would be in any other kind of hour drama.
Yeah, that's a great point. You could easily take the sci-fi element out of this and you'd still have a really great family drama scene.
I mean, I know we've seen this in other movies and TV shows and stuff where, the highfalutin family member comes in and somebody is against them, and really they're just wanting to help their family and see them, and anyway, and they butt heads. Well, and there's always a kid who's like, gee, Willikers, you're awesome. Yeah. And the old-fashioned person is not happy with it. And, we have that here because Renee says that he wants to pilot starships and all that. He wrote a paper about starships, and then we find out, he got a ribbon for it, and that Picard had done the same thing when he was a kid, but he was trying to play it down. And I felt like in that part of the scene that he was trying to play it down because he knew that it was going to start something with Robert, but it didn't matter because it started something anyway.
Well, because his brother's always ready to start something.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? He's like, oh, you have this false modesty, and this is a really great family dynamic scene, and where you've got this older brother who's everything's too convenient, everything's too easy, maybe things should be a little harder, to remind us of who we are, kind of a thing, and his son is very different. His son, even at this young age, is I want to be on a starship. I want to pilot, a ship in space. I don't want to stay here. And it
hurts Robert to hear his son basically say, I don't want to be you, I want to be him.
Oh, 100%. And it's just fanning those fires of jealousy. Because his brother's jealous.
It's like Renee is Luke Skywalker, and Robert is Uncle Owen.
Yes.
And, Picard's Obi-Wan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, actually. And it's very true. The same thing with Luke. He didn't want to stay on Tatooine and be a fucking moisture farmer. He wanted to go join the rebellion.
Sorry to jump ahead, but like the very end scene where we see the kid out there, like outside, I thought of Luke on the moisture farm looking at the suns, looking beyond the horizon. What's out there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a total parallel between this and the Luke Skywalker story in A New Hope of like, Luke just wants to, run off and join the rebellion and go in space and, do all this stuff. And Uncle Owen's like, stay here and help me moisture farm and drink your blue milk and shut up and all that stuff.
Power converters for everyone.
Yay! Poor Luke, he never did
get one.
Never get those power converters.
Owen shows up with a power converter, so that'd be great. I would love to see that. And you get a power converter, and you.
I know. Luke just wanted to go to Tashi Station and get those power converters, but he never did. Like the biggest cliffhanger in the whole franchise.
Another thing in this scene that sets Robert off is that Marie's like, oh, the mayor says he wants to give you a parade to Picard for being like a hometown hero, basically, and welcome him back because he hasn't been home in 20 years. And, Robert's never had a parade. He's making good wine. He wants to be recognized. But no, such is his life.
But, you definitely do also see elements of the biblical story of the prodigal son here as well. Yes. You could definitely draw a line between this and that account as well of like the son who like leaves home and becomes, does something very different than his family wanted from him. And then when he shows back up, years later, the family just wants to celebrate that he's home, and the older brother is very resentful of like, well, I've been here this whole time. Why don't you throw me a party once in a while? There's absolutely a lot of those elements in this story here as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Absolutely. It's the family is, I think, like, what's his name? Renee. And then, what's the wife's name?
Marie.
They're very happy to have him here. And I think it's, with the two brothers, it's basically the jealousy. And here's the thing. The jealousy is Robert's jealousy is just, he's overcome with it. Mm-hmm. And this parade is not helping.
Nope.
But on the flip side, Picard in this instance he doesn't feel like a hero at all. So it's the last thing that he wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, jumping ahead to the fight that him and his brother have when to me, I think one of the best absolute scenes of TV I've ever seen when Picard is like, when Jean-Luc is like sitting in the mud and he's laughing with his brother, and then it quickly turns to crying, and he just starts like spilling out all of these feelings about what happened to him, and saying, I should have been able to stop them. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough. Like, this is what's been plaguing him this whole time, that he's a fraud. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't Captain Picard enough to defeat the Borg and stop them. And it's... So, of course,
his whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
His whole life he has been the best at everything. And he couldn't protect anyone. He couldn't stop the Borg on his, any of that. And he just feels like he failed all over. And yeah, it is great. Like, he goes from laughing to, like, sobbing, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course he doesn't want a parade. He really does not think he's a hero. Like, he's not being falsely modest of like, oh, no, I'm no hero. But he really
as much as Robert wants to say that he's being falsely modest, like, Robert's just like, oh, yeah, don't...
Here's my question. Is Picard more comfortable with the way Robert's reacting towards him than the way the family is? Because, hear me out, the family they're happy to have him there, Marie and Renee, but they're also treating him like this hero, and I know that Picard's not resenting them for it, but on the flip side, I feel like he's very self-deprecating,
right,
in this moment. So he's almost, is he welcoming the way Robert's treating him? At first, because he feels worthless.
Maybe he's probably used, and he's also used to it. So it's also a bit comforting, probably, because it's familiar. Because that's how he's always been treated by his brother.
There's a great what precipitates the fight is Robert asking Jean-Luc, "Did you come home because you wanted me to take care of you?" Mm-hmm. And he asks it so snidely and so with such this tone of bitterness and anger and resentment and all that. It really pushes Jean-Luc over the edge, and it causes these two brothers to like really kind of like get like physically fight about this. And I think you're 100% right, Brian. I think Jean-Luc is way more comfortable with the way Robert treats him than with the way Marie and Renee treat him. Even his friend Louis, who we're about to meet in the next scene, Louis is, setting him up as some kind of like a savior to this project that he's working on, and he feels uncomfortable in that too.
Yeah. I think that Picard thinks that Marie and Renee are just treating him like that because they think he's a hero. Renee probably is some because he's a kid and he's just in awe of this captain that does all these cool things and that he's related to him. But Marie, I think, genuinely wants to be nice to him since she's had all this correspondence with him because he is family, and she knows that he doesn't really have actual family out there. Mm-hmm. Even though, his crew is sort of like his family. But like, yeah, Louis is just, he's definitely, wanting the parade kind of guy. Like, he is definitely pushing for Picard to be this larger than life hero. It's gonna solve all the problems that they have with this project and everything.
Yeah. I also think too that like Renee and Marie are kind of treating Jean-Luc with like kid gloves of like, oh, he's been through a trauma, we have to be extra nice to him, which is, I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's a very human reaction of like, this guy that we don't really know has been through a terrible thing, we'd better treat him extra nice. I think that's a very human response. But then you've got Robert who's like, fuck you, little brother, I never liked you anyway. Like, and that's familiar to Jean-Luc. And I think to a degree, as much as he, is enjoying being with Renee and Marie, it's when he's with his brother who's really pushing his buttons that he really feels like he's home.
Well, and I also think that, like, part of the reason he is the best is because he had somebody coming down on him the whole time. And he was able to overcome that. And I felt like in this situation, his brother's doing the exact same thing. And how does Picard react? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He finally, stands up on his own 2 feet and, takes matters into his hands. And it all works out. I think, they both needed this moment. They both needed that roll around in the mud, that had to happen.
Yeah.
Which Picard says, you know, you deserve that to